The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the streets. Cars moved slowly through the evening traffic, their headlights cutting through the dimming light. Benjamin Hayes sat behind the wheel of his sedan, gripping it tightly, as he navigated the busy intersection. He had just left a long day at the courthouse and was eager to get home to his wife, Clara. The weight of the day's decision still lingered in his mind, but he tried to focus on the road ahead. Benjamin was not an ordinary man. As the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he carried a heavy responsibility. Every ruling he made had far-reaching consequences, affecting countless lives. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, he was simply a man driving home after work. Or so he thought. A few blocks away from his house, red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Startled, Benjamin glanced at the speedometer. He wasn't speeding. He checked his surroundings. His turn signals were off, his seatbelt securely fastened. Still, the police car behind him signaled for him to pull over. Confused but compliant, Benjamin eased his vehicle to the side of the road. As he rolled down, his window, a cold breeze swept into the car. Two officers approached, their flashlights shining directly into his face. One of them, Officer Ryan Cole, stood taller than the other, his posture rigid and intimidating. His partner, Megan Doyle, hung back slightly, her expression unreadable under the brim of her hat. "License and registration," Ryan barked, his tone sharp and accusatory. Benjamin nodded politely, reaching into his pocket for his wallet and then leaning over to grab the registration from the glove compartment. "Of course, officer," he said calmly, handing over the requested documents. Ryan snatched them from his hand without a word. He flipped open the wallet first, squinting at the ID inside. Then he turned to the registration card. For a moment, there was silence. Benjamin waited patiently, though unease began to creep into his chest. Something about Ryan's demeanor felt off. "This says you're Benjamin Hayes," Ryan finally said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You expect me to believe that?" Benjamin frowned, taken aback by the question. "Yes, that's correct. I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court." Ryan let out a short, derisive laugh. "Right, and I'm the President of the United States." He glanced at Megan, who shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Turning back to Benjamin, Ryan leaned closer, resting one hand on the roof of the car. "Listen, buddy, I don't care who you say you are. You're coming with us." "What?" Benjamin asked, his confusion turning to alarm. "Why? What's this about?" "You'll find out soon enough," Ryan replied, his lips curling into a smug grin. Before Benjamin could respond, Ryan opened the car door and grabbed his arm, yanking him out onto the pavement. The sudden movement startled Benjamin, and he stumbled slightly before regaining his balance. "Wait! This is a mistake," Benjamin protested, trying to pull away. But Ryan's grip was firm, unrelenting. "I told you, I'm the Chief Justice. Call anyone at the courthouse if you don't believe me." Ryan ignored him, twisting Benjamin's arms behind his back and slapping handcuffs on his wrists. The eye-bomb metal dug painfully into his skin, but the physical discomfort paled in comparison to the shock coursing through him. How could this be happening? Wasn't his position supposed to protect him from such blatant injustice? Megan hovered nearby, her flashlight trained on Benjamin's face. She seemed hesitant, glancing between her partner and the man in handcuffs. "Ryan," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Maybe we should double-check." "Shut up, Megan," Ryan snapped, cutting her off. "We don't need to waste time on this clown. Let's go." Clown. The word stung more than Benjamin expected. It wasn't just the insult, it was the casual cruelty behind it, the way Ryan dismissed him as though he were nothing. Benjamin opened his mouth to argue again, but Ryan shoved him toward the patrol car. The force of the push caught him off guard, and he nearly tripped over his own feet. "Please," Benjamin pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "You don't understand. This is a misunderstanding. I'm telling you the truth." Ryan stopped abruptly, spinning around to face him. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, anger maybe, or satisfaction. "Oh, I understand perfectly," he sneered. You think your fancy title makes you better than everyone else, but guess what? Out here, you're nobody, just another guy breaking the law. But I wasn't doing anything wrong, Benjamin insisted, his heart pounding in his chest. I wasn't speeding, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't even distracted. Why are you arresting me? Ryan leaned in close, his breath hot against Benjamin's ear. Because I can, he whispered harshly. Then louder, he added, and because people like you need to learn your place. People like you. Those 3 words hit Benjamin like a punch to the gut. He realized then that this wasn't about a traffic stop gone wrong. This wasn't about justice or fairness. This was about power, and the abuse of it. Ryan didn't care whether Benjamin was guilty or innocent. All that mattered was that Benjamin was black, and Ryan believed he could get away with whatever he wanted. For a brief moment, Benjamin considered fighting back. He could shout, resist, demand answers. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't make a difference. Not here, not now. So instead, he allowed himself to be pushed into the back seat of the patrol car, the door slamming shut behind him. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, Benjamin stared out the window, watching the familiar streets blur past. His mind raced with questions. Would anyone believe him when they found out what had happened? Would his colleagues rally to his defense, or would they distance themselves to avoid controversy? And most importantly, how could he prove his innocence when the system itself seemed determined to crush him? The drive to the precinct felt endless. Ryan and Megan exchanged quiet words up front, their conversation muffled but tense. Occasionally, Ryan would glance back at Benjamin through the rearview mirror, his gaze filled with disdain. Each look chipped away at Benjamin's composure, leaving him feeling smaller and more powerless than ever before. When they finally arrived, Benjamin was led inside and placed in a holding area. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the sterile room. Other detainees watched silently as he was escorted to a bench, their expressions ranging from curiosity to indifference. Benjamin sat down heavily, his hands still cuffed behind his back. He closed his eyes, taking slow, deliberate breaths in an attempt to steady himself. This couldn't be real. Surely someone would realize the absurdity of the situation and intervene. Surely logic and reason would prevail. But as the minutes ticked by and no help came, Benjamin began to doubt everything he thought he knew about fairness, justice, and the rule of law. And then, amidst the chaos of his thoughts, a single realization struck him. If this could happen to him, a man at the very top of the legal hierarchy, what chance did ordinary citizens have? The precinct was alive with noise. Phones rang constantly. Officers shouted instructions to one another, and the hum of printers added to the chaotic symphony. Benjamin sat on a cold metal bench in the corner of the holding area, his hands still, cuffed behind his back. The room smelled faintly of sweat and disinfectant, and the air felt heavy, pressing down on him. He tried to focus on his breathing, but his mind kept racing. Every so often, an officer would walk by, glancing at him briefly, before moving on. Some looked curious, others didn't seem to care at all. No one spoke to him directly, though he could hear murmurs from nearby desks. Chief Justice? Yeah, right, one officer scoffed as he passed, shaking his head. Another laughed quietly, muttering something under his breath that Benjamin couldn't quite catch. Benjamin's heart sank further with each passing moment. How could this be happening? He had spent decades building a reputation for fairness and integrity. People respected him, or at least they used to. Now here he was, treated like a common criminal because of lies and prejudice. It felt surreal, almost dreamlike, except for the sharp pain in his wrists where the handcuffs dug into his skin. He glanced around the room, searching for any sign of help or compassion. Most of the officers seemed indifferent, going about their duties without sparing him a second thought. A few detainees in the holding area exchanged wary looks with him, but none dared to speak. One older man sitting across from him gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging the absurdity of the situation. Benjamin managed a weak smile in return, grateful for even that small gesture of solidarity. After what felt like hours, Detective Allen Hughes approached him. Alan was a tall man with graying hair and a stern expression. He carried a clipboard and wore a badge clipped to his belt. Unlike Ryan Cole, Alan didn't sneer or mock Benjamin. Instead, he regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "You're claiming you're Benjamin Hayes, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court?" Alan asked, his tone neutral. "Yes, that's correct," Benjamin replied, his voice steady despite the frustration bubbling inside him. "I don't know why I'm here. This is some kind of misunderstanding." Alan studied him for a moment, then flipped through the papers on his clipboard. "If you are who you say you are, you should understand how serious this is. We can't just take your word for it." "I'm not asking you to," Benjamin said, leaning forward slightly. "Call the courthouse, talk to Judge Laura Bennett. She'll confirm my identity. She works closely with me." Alan nodded slowly, jotting something down on his clipboard. "We'll look into it, but until we verify your story, you'll remain here." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Benjamin alone once again. Benjamin slumped back against the wall, exhaling deeply. At least someone was willing to check his claims. That had to count for something, right? Still, the wait was agonizing. Minutes stretched into what felt like eternity, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. What if they refused to investigate? What if Ryan and Megan had already convinced everyone else that he was lying? His thoughts drifted to Clara, his wife. She'd be worried sick by now. They always called each other when one of them was running, late. By this time, she must have realized something was wrong. Would she call the courthouse? Try to reach out to Laura herself? He hoped so. If anyone could help him, it was Laura. She knew the system inside and out and wouldn't hesitate to act. As the minutes dragged on, Benjamin began reflecting on his life, the long journey that had brought him to this point. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, he had faced discrimination early on. Teachers doubted his abilities, classmates teased him, and strangers judged him based on the color of his skin. But he hadn't let it stop him. He worked hard, excelled in school, and eventually earned a scholarship to law school. From there, he climbed the ranks, earning respect and admiration along the way. Now, sitting in this dingy holding cell, he wondered if any of that mattered. All the awards, the accolades, the years of service, they meant nothing to people like Ryan Cole. To them, he was just another black man to be dismissed and humiliated. The realization stung more than he cared to admit. Just then, a commotion erupted near the front desk. A young woman burst into the precinct, her face flushed with anger and concern. It was Clara. She spotted Benjamin immediately and rushed over, ignoring the protests of an officer trying to block her path. "Benjamin!" she cried, kneeling beside him. Her eyes were red and tears streamed down her cheeks. "What's going on? Why are you here?" Benjamin forced a reassuring smile, though his heart ached seeing her so upset. "It's okay, Clara. It's complicated. There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Clara repeated incredulously, gesturing at the handcuffs. "They arrested you. For what?" Before Benjamin could answer, Officer Ryan appeared, his arms crossed and his jaw tight. "Ma'am, you need to leave. You're not allowed back here." Clara stood up abruptly, glaring at Ryan. "Who do you think you are? Do you have any idea who my husband is?" Ryan smirked, clearly unfazed by her outrage. "Oh, I know exactly who he claims to be. Doesn't change the fact that he broke the law." "This is ridiculous," Clara snapped, pointing a finger at him. "You've made a huge mistake and you're going to regret it." Ryan shrugged, unaffected. "Take it up with the courts, lady. Until then, step outside." Clara hesitated, torn between staying with Benjamin and finding a way to fight for him. Finally, she leaned down and whispered, "I'll fix this, Benjamin. I promise." Then reluctantly, she allowed an officer to escort her out of the room. Watching her go, Benjamin felt a surge of gratitude mixed with guilt. He hated involving her in this mess, but he also knew she wouldn't rest until she cleared his name. She was strong-willed and resourceful, qualities he admired deeply. If anyone could navigate this nightmare, it was her. Hours passed, and the precinct grew quieter as night fell. Officers came and went, but no one offered Benjamin any updates. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since lunch, but hunger was the least of his worries. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him, both physical and emotional. He closed his eyes, resting his head against the wall, and tried to imagine himself anywhere else. When Detective Allen returned, Benjamin perked up instantly. "Did you find anything?" he asked, his voice tinged with hope. Allen hesitated, looking conflicted. "We contacted the courthouse. Someone confirmed your identity." Relief washed over Benjamin, but it was short-lived. "Then why am I still here? You know who I am." "There's more to it," Allen said cautiously. "Officer Cole insists there's evidence tying you to... Well, let's just say it's complicated. We're reviewing everything now." "Evidence?" Benjamin echoed, his blood running cold. "What evidence? This is absurd." Allen held up a hand, silencing him. "Look, Mr. Hayes, Chief Justice Hayes, I believe you're telling the truth. But these things take time. I'll do what I can to speed things along." Time. That was the last thing Benjamin wanted to hear about. Every second he spent in this place felt like a lifetime. Yet he nodded gratefully, knowing Allen was likely his best ally in the room. As Allen walked away, Benjamin leaned back again, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Laura, wondering if Clara had reached her yet. Surely Laura would be outraged by this injustice. She'd know exactly how to handle it, how to expose the truth and hold people accountable. But deep down, Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling that this ordeal wasn't just about him. It was about something bigger, a broken system that allowed such blatant abuse of power to thrive. Even if he got out tonight, the scars would remain, not just for him, but for everyone who trusted the law to protect them. And as the clock ticked, toward midnight, Benjamin realized something else. Whether he liked it or not, this experience would change him forever. The night wore on, and the precinct grew quieter. Most of the officers had left for their shifts or retreated to their desks to finish paperwork. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow over the room. Benjamin sat hunched, on the bench, his body stiff from hours of sitting in the same position. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, fear, frustration, but exhaustion was starting to take its toll. Detective Allen Hughes returned after what felt like an eternity. This time, he carried a folder with him. His expression was unreadable, but there was a tension in his movements that made Benjamin uneasy. He stopped a few feet away, flipping through the papers inside the folder. "Chief Justice Hayes," Allen began, his voice low and measured. "We've reviewed the evidence Officer Cole claims to have against you." Benjamin straightened up, his eyes locking onto Allen's face. "What evidence? I haven't done anything wrong." Allen hesitated, glancing at the folder again before meeting Benjamin's gaze. "According to Officer Cole, he found drugs in your car during the search." "What?" Benjamin exclaimed, his voice rising in disbelief. "That's impossible. There were no drugs in my car." Allen nodded slowly, as if expecting this reaction. "I understand how serious this is, but according to the report, Officer Cole discovered a small bag of cocaine hidden under the passenger seat." Benjamin stared at him, his mind racing. This had to be a setup. Someone must have planted the drugs while he was being arrested. He remembered Ryan leaning into his car earlier, rummaging around without permission. At the time, Benjamin had been too shocked and humiliated to protest. Now it all made sense. "This is a lie," Benjamin said firmly, his voice shaking with anger. "They planted those drugs. You have to believe me." Allen sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I want to help you, but without proof. It's your word against theirs. And right now they're sticking to their story." Benjamin clenched his fists, the cuffs digging painfully into his wrists. It was infuriating. How could anyone trust people like Ryan Cole? They abused their power, twisted the truth, and destroyed lives. And they always got away with it. He thought about all the cases he'd presided over, all the defendants who claimed they were innocent. How many of them had been telling the truth? How many had been victims of corruption just like him? As if sensing his despair, Allen added, "There's still hope. If we can find inconsistencies in their story or prove tampering, we might be able to clear your name." Benjamin nodded, clinging to that sliver of hope. "Then do it. Please. Find out what really happened." Alan promised to keep investigating, but his tone suggested he wasn't optimistic. As he walked away, Benjamin leaned back against the wall, feeling utterly defeated. The weight of the situation pressed down on him heavier than ever before. Every passing minute felt like a lifetime, and the uncertainty gnawed at him relentlessly. Meanwhile, outside the precinct, Clara Hayes paced anxiously in front of the building. She had called Laura Bennett immediately after leaving the station, and now the two women stood together, discussing their next move. Laura was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s with piercing blue eyes and a commanding presence. She listened intently as Clara recounted everything she'd seen and heard. "They're lying," Clara insisted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Benjamin wouldn't break the law, not even accidentally. This has to be some kind of setup." Laura nodded grimly. "I agree. Ryan Cole has a reputation for targeting minorities. He's arrogant and reckless, and he thinks he's untouchable. But we can use that against him." "How?" Clara asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "They won't listen to us. They already think Benjamin's guilty." "We'll make them listen," Laura replied, her tone firm. "First, we need to gather evidence. Did anyone record the arrest?" Clara shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe someone nearby saw what happened. I'll start making calls, see if anyone witnessed it." Laura placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Good. In the meantime, I'll reach out to my contacts at the courthouse. If necessary, I'll file a formal complaint and demand an independent investigation." Clara managed a weak smile, grateful for Laura's determination. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd fight just as hard," Laura said simply. "Now let's get to work." Back inside the precinct, Benjamin's thoughts turned to the countless injustices he'd witnessed throughout his career. As Chief Justice, he had always believed in the fairness of the system. He trusted that the law would prevail, that truth and integrity would win out in the end. But now, sitting in this holding cell, he realized how naive he had been. The system wasn't perfect. It was flawed, biased, and often cruel. And it didn't matter how high you climbed. If someone wanted to bring you down, they could. His reflections were interrupted when Ryan Cole appeared, smirking as usual. He leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, studying Benjamin with a look of amusement. "So, Chief Justice," Ryan drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Still claiming you're innocent?" Benjamin met his gaze, refusing to show weakness. "I am innocent, and you know it." Ryan chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "You people always play the victim card. It's pathetic." "You people?" Benjamin repeated, his voice rising. "Is that what this is about, because I'm black?" Ryan's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Don't twist this into some racial conspiracy. You broke the law, plain and simple." "No, I didn't." Benjamin shot back, his patience wearing thin. "You planted those drugs. You framed me. Why? Because you hate me? Because you think I'm less than you?" Ryan stepped closer, his face inches from Benjamin's. "Let me tell you something, buddy. No matter how fancy your title is, you'll always be just another criminal to me. Got it?" Benjamin stared at him, his chest heaving with suppressed rage. For a moment he considered lashing out, shouting until someone listened. But he knew it wouldn't change anything. People like Ryan thrived on conflict. They wanted excuses to justify their actions. So instead, Benjamin took a deep breath and forced himself to remain calm. "You'll regret this," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "When the truth comes out, you'll wish you hadn't done this." Ryan laughed, clearly unconvinced. "Yeah, sure, keep dreaming, pal." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Benjamin alone once again. Hours passed, and fatigue began to set in. Benjamin's eyelids grew heavy, and his thoughts became muddled. He tried to stay awake, fearing what might happen if he fell asleep in this place. but his body had other plans. Just as he started to drift off, a commotion near the entrance caught his attention. A group of reporters had gathered outside the precinct, their cameras flashing and microphones raised. Someone had leaked the story, and now the media was swarming the scene. Protesters soon joined them, chanting slogans and holding signs that read, "Justice for Benjamin Hayes" and "End Police Brutality." The noise spilled into the building, echoing through the halls. Benjamin watched from a distance as officers scrambled to address the growing crowd. For the first time since his arrest, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the public outcry would force the department to act. Maybe someone would finally listen. As dawn approached, Detective Allen returned with an update. "The commissioner wants to speak with you," he said, unlocking the handcuffs. "Let's go." Benjamin rubbed his sore wrists, relief washing over him. Whatever came next, he knew he couldn't give up. Too much was at stake, not just for him but for everyone who believed in justice. The commissioner's office was a stark contrast to the chaos of the holding area. The room was spacious, with polished wooden furniture and soft lighting that gave it an air of authority. A large desk dominated the space, behind which sat Commissioner Gregory Wells, a tall man in his 60s with graying hair and a stern expression. His uniform was immaculate, every detail perfectly in place. To Benjamin, he looked like someone who took pride in order and control. Detective Allen Hughes stood nearby, his arms crossed, watching silently as Benjamin entered the room. He had escorted Benjamin from the holding area, but now he stepped back, leaving the Chief Justice alone to face the commissioner. Benjamin felt a mix of relief and unease. On one hand, he was finally being treated with some respect. On the other hand, he knew this meeting wouldn't automatically solve his problems. Commissioner Wells gestured for Benjamin to sit down in one of the chairs facing his desk. "Chief Justice Hayes," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I understand you're claiming there's been a misunderstanding regarding your arrest." Benjamin nodded, leaning forward slightly. "Yes, Commissioner, I'm innocent. Officer Ryan Cole is lying about finding drugs in my car. They planted them. You have to believe me." Wells studied him for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Let me be clear, Mr. Hayes, this is a very serious accusation against both you and my officers. If what you're saying is true, then we have a major issue on our hands, but if you're wrong—" "I'm not wrong," Benjamin interrupted, his voice steady despite the frustration bubbling inside him. "I've done nothing illegal. I was pulled over for no reason, humiliated in front of bystanders, and falsely accused of possessing drugs, all because of who I am." Wells raised a hand, signaling for Benjamin to stop. "I appreciate your passion, but I need facts, not emotions. Do you have any evidence to support your claim?" Benjamin hesitated. He didn't have concrete proof. Not yet, but he knew others were working to uncover the truth. "My wife and Judge Laura Bennett are gathering information. There may be witnesses or footage from nearby cameras. Someone must have seen what happened." Wells nodded slowly, jotting something down on a notepad. "We'll look into that. In the meantime, I've ordered an internal review of Officer Cole's conduct. If there's misconduct here, it will be addressed." Benjamin wanted to believe him, but skepticism lingered. Internal reviews often amounted to little more than lip service, especially when powerful figures were involved. Still, he forced himself to remain hopeful. "Thank you, Commissioner. I just want the truth to come out." Wells leaned back in his chair, folding his hands on the desk. "Mr. Hayes, I won't sugarcoat this. Even if we clear your name, the damage has already been done. Public trust is fragile, and incidents like this only make it worse. We can't undo what's happened, but we can work toward accountability." Benjamin nodded again, though the words stung. Trust wasn't something easily repaired, especially when it came to institutions like law enforcement. He thought about all the people who had lost faith in the system long before this night, and how many might lose hope entirely because of what had happened to him. As the meeting ended, Detective Allen escorted Benjamin back to a quieter part of the precinct. The noise from outside had grown louder, with protesters chanting and reporters shouting questions. Through a window, Benjamin caught glimpses of the crowd. Signs reading, "Justice for Benjamin Hayes" and "End Systemic Racism" filled the streets. It was overwhelming and humbling to see so many people rallying on his behalf. Clara and Laura arrived shortly afterward, their faces a mix of anger and determination. Clara rushed to Benjamin's side, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm fine," Benjamin replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But this isn't over yet." Laura stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We've made progress. Daniel Foster, a journalist who covers police misconduct, is investigating Ryan Cole's history. So far, he's uncovered several complaints against him, including allegations of racial profiling and excessive force." "That's good news," Benjamin said, allowing himself a small smile. "What else?" "We also found a witness," Laura continued. "A young woman named Emily Carter recorded part of your arrest on her phone. She's willing to testify, and the video shows Ryan tampering with your car." Benjamin's heart leapt at the news. Finally, there was tangible evidence to prove his innocence. "That's incredible. Where is she now?" "She's safe," Laura assured him. "We've arranged for her to meet with Daniel and share the footage. Once it's released, it'll blow this case wide open." Despite the optimism, Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling that things could still go wrong. People like Ryan Cole didn't give up easily, and they often had allies in high places. What if the video disappeared? What if Emily was intimidated into silence? These fears gnawed at him, but he pushed them aside. Right now, all he could do was trust Laura and Clara to keep fighting. Outside, the protests intensified. Community. Leaders like Marcus Dixon and Evelyn Carter joined the demonstrators, amplifying their message. Marcus, a former teacher turned activist, addressed the crowd through a megaphone. "This isn't just about Benjamin Hayes," he shouted, his voice booming over the din. "It's about every person who's been targeted, harassed, or locked up because of the color of their skin." The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy palpable. Evelyn, a social worker known for her advocacy work, added, "We demand justice, not just today but every day. No more lies, no more cover-ups." Journalist Daniel Foster moved through the throng, interviewing protesters and documenting their stories. He was a wiry man in his 30s with sharp features and an intense gaze. His camera crew followed closely, capturing footage of the rally. Daniel had built a reputation for exposing corruption, and Benjamin's case was shaping up to be one of his biggest stories yet. Back inside the precinct, tensions simmered among the officers. Some supported Ryan Cole, dismissing the accusations as baseless attacks. Others grew uneasy, realizing the potential fallout if the allegations proved true. Captain Paul Simmons, Ryan's superior, called an emergency meeting to address the situation. "This is getting out of hand," Simmons barked, pacing in front of his team. "If Hayes walks free, it'll make us look incompetent. Worse, it'll validate every critic who says we're corrupt." "What do you expect us to do?" Megan Doyle asked, her voice hesitant. "If he really is innocent—" "Don't start with that nonsense," Simmons snapped, cutting her off. "Our job is to maintain order, not coddle criminals. Stick to the official story unless told otherwise." Megan exchanged a glance with another officer, her discomfort evident. She hadn't agreed with Ryan's actions during the arrest, but speaking out now felt risky. Loyalty to the badge often came at a cost. Meanwhile, Benjamin remained in limbo, waiting for the next move. Clara stayed by his side, holding his hand tightly. "We're going to get through this," she whispered, her voice filled with conviction. "Together." Benjamin squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. "I know, but it's bigger than us now. This fight, it's for everyone." As the hours passed, the city buzzed with anticipation. News outlets picked up the story, spreading it across social media platforms. Hashtags like "Justice for Benjamin" and "DASA Accountability" now trended nationwide. Politicians issued statements, some calling for investigations, others defending the police department. The nation watched closely, divided between those who saw Benjamin as a victim of systemic racism and those who dismissed his claims as excuses. Amid the chaos, Benjamin reflected on the weight of his position. As Chief Justice, he had always believed in fairness and equality under the law. Now he realized how fragile those ideals truly were. The system wasn't broken. It was designed this way, built to protect those in power while punishing the powerless. Still, he refused to give up. Whatever happened next, he vowed to use his experience to push for change. Because if someone like him, a man at the top of the legal hierarchy, could fall victim to injustice, then anyone could. And that realization was both terrifying and motivating. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the precinct, casting long shadows across the floor. Benjamin sat quietly in a corner of the room, his body weary but his mind sharp. He had spent most of the night talking to Clara, Laura, and Detective Alan Hughes, piecing together their strategy for exposing the truth. Each update brought a mix of hope and dread, hope that justice might prevail, and dread that something could still go wrong. Outside, the protests continued to grow louder. The streets were filled with people holding signs and chanting slogans. Reporters jostled for position, microphones in hand, eager to capture every moment of the unfolding drama. Journalist Daniel Foster was at the center of it all, interviewing witnesses and gathering evidence. His camera crew filmed tirelessly, capturing the raw emotion of the crowd. The city felt alive with tension, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the next big revelation. Inside the precinct, Officer Ryan Cole paced nervously near his desk. His usual smug demeanor had faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. He glanced frequently at Captain Paul Simmons, who stood nearby speaking into a phone. Megan Doyle sat silently at her workstation, avoiding eye contact with both men. She had overheard snippets of their conversation earlier, Ryan insisting they stick to the story, Simmons warning them to stay quiet, and it left her feeling conflicted. Something about this case didn't sit right with her, but voicing her doubts seemed impossible. Ryan finally approached Megan, leaning close to whisper harshly, "You better keep your mouth shut, you hear me? If anyone asks, we followed protocol, no mistakes." Megan nodded reluctantly, though her hands trembled as she typed up a report. She knew what Ryan was capable of, and crossing him wasn't an option. But deep down, she couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at her conscience. Back in the quieter part of the station, Benjamin listened intently as Laura outlined their plan. "Emily Carter's video is our strongest piece of evidence," she explained, her tone firm and focused. "It shows Ryan planting drugs in your car. Once Daniel releases it, there'll be no denying what happened." Benjamin nodded, relief washing over him. "That's good. When will he publish it?" "Soon," Laura replied. "He's editing the footage now and plans to release it online within the hour. After that, it'll spread like wildfire." Clara gripped Benjamin's hand tightly, her eyes shining with determination. "We're so close, Benjamin, just hold on a little longer." As they spoke, Detective Alan Hughes entered the room, his expression grave. "There's been a development," he said, his voice low. "Captain Simmons just called a meeting with Ryan and Megan. They're trying to coordinate their stories." Laura frowned, her jaw tightening. "They're panicking. That means they know the video will destroy them." "What can we do?" Clara asked anxiously. "Can we stop them from covering it up?" "We need to act fast," Laura said, standing up. "Daniel's working on the video, but we should also alert the commissioner. If we present the footage directly to him, he won't be able to ignore it." Alan nodded in agreement. "I'll escort you to his office. Let's not waste any time." The group moved quickly through the precinct, their footsteps echoing against the tiled floors. Commissioner Wells looked up as they entered, his face unreadable. "What is it now?" he asked, his tone clipped. Laura stepped forward, holding out her phone. "Sir, we have proof of misconduct. This video shows Officer Ryan Cole planting drugs in Chief Justice Hayes's car during the arrest." Wells took the phone, his brow furrowing as he watched the footage. The video was shaky but clear enough to show Ryan reaching into Benjamin's car and placing a small bag under the seat. There was no mistaking what was happening. Wells's expression darkened, and he set the phone down slowly. "This changes everything." he muttered, rubbing his temples. If this gets out. It already has, Laura interrupted firmly. Journalist Daniel Foster is releasing it to the public as we speak. By tonight, everyone will know the truth. Wells sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. All right. I'll issue a statement acknowledging the misconduct and ordering an immediate investigation. Officers involved will be suspended pending further review. Benjamin felt a surge of relief, but he knew the fight wasn't over yet. Thank you, Commissioner. But this isn't just about me. It's about fixing a broken system. People like Ryan Cole shouldn't have the power to ruin lives. Wells nodded solemnly. You're right. We'll address the larger issues, but first, we need to handle this situation responsibly. As the meeting ended, news of the video began spreading rapidly. Protesters cheered when Daniel Foster posted the clip online, sharing it across social media platforms. Within minutes, hashtags like Cheer Justice for Benjamin and Cheer Expose the Truth dominated Twitter feeds. Politicians scrambled to respond, some calling for reforms, others defending the police department. The nation was watching, and the pressure mounted. At the precinct, chaos erupted. Captain Simmons stormed into the main area, his face red with anger. What the hell is going on? He demanded, glaring at Ryan and Megan. How did that video get out? Ryan stammered, caught off guard. I don't know, sir. Someone must have leaked it. Simmons slammed his fist on a nearby desk. This is a disaster. Do you realize what this means for us? Before Ryan could respond, another officer rushed in, panic in his voice. Sir, we've got a problem. Protesters are heading this way. They're demanding arrests. Simmons cursed under his breath, turning to Megan. Get upstairs and secure the evidence room, and you, he pointed at Ryan, stay put. Don't say a word to anyone. As officers scrambled to prepare for the incoming crowd, Benjamin and his supporters gathered outside the precinct. The energy was electric, with chants of "No justice, no peace" ringing through the air. Protest leaders addressed the crowd, urging calm while emphasizing the importance of accountability. Marcus Dixon took the megaphone, his voice steady and powerful. Today, we stand united, not just for Benjamin Hayes, but for every person who's been wronged by this system. We demand change, not excuses. The crowd roared in agreement, their voices echoing off the buildings. Evelyn Carter added, let this be a turning point. Let it remind us that silence only empowers those who seek to harm us. Amid the commotion, Daniel Foster stood nearby, filming the scene. His camera captured the passion and determination of the protesters along with the growing tension between law enforcement and the public. For once, the truth seemed unstoppable. Inside, Ryan and Megan exchanged uneasy glances. The walls around them felt like they were closing in. Ryan tried to maintain his bravado, but his confidence wavered. They can't pin this on us, he muttered, more to himself than to Megan. We were just doing our jobs. Megan didn't respond. Instead, she stared at the floor, her guilt overwhelming. She thought about the countless times she'd turned a blind eye to Ryan's behavior, convincing herself it wasn't her place to intervene. Now faced with the consequences, she realized how complicit she had been. Outside, Benjamin addressed the crowd, his voice trembling with emotion. I never imagined I'd find myself here today, as a victim of the very system I've dedicated my life to serving. But let this be a lesson to us all. Justice isn't given, it's fought for. Together we can create a world where no one has to endure what I've endured. The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers drowning out the distant sirens approaching the scene. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as history unfolded. For Benjamin, it was a bittersweet victory, one that came at great personal cost but carried the promise of meaningful change. As the day wore on, arrests were made. Ryan and Megan were taken into custody, their faces pale with fear. Captain Sue. Simmons resigned amid mounting scrutiny, and Commissioner Wells announced sweeping reforms aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within the department. But even as the immediate crisis subsided, Benjamin knew the battle was far from over. True justice required more than punishing individuals. It demanded systemic change, and that fight would take time, effort, and unwavering resolve. Standing beside Clara, Benjamin looked out at the sea of faces before him. Despite everything, he felt a spark of hope. Change was possible, it had to be. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Benjamin Hayes, once a private figure known only within legal circles, had become the face of a national movement. His story dominated headlines, sparking debates about police accountability, systemic racism, and the flaws in the justice system. For many, he represented both a symbol of resilience and a stark reminder of how easily power could be abused. Benjamin's life was far from normal. Reporters camped outside his home, eager for interviews or statements. Emails flooded his inbox, some offering support, others criticizing him for speaking out. Clara handled much of the attention, screening calls and managing logistics while ensuring her husband stayed focused on recovery. Physically, Benjamin was fine. He hadn't been injured during his arrest. But emotionally, he was drained. The weight of everything that had happened pressed heavily on him, leaving him restless at night and distracted during the day. Despite the chaos, Benjamin found solace in small moments, sitting with Clara in their living room, sipping coffee as they watched the sunrise, talking to Laura Bennett over the phone, strategizing ways to push for reform, reading letters from ordinary people who thanked him for shining a light on issues they'd long struggled to articulate. These connections reminded him why he couldn't give up, not now, not ever. Outside, the protests continued. What began as a local outcry had grown into a nationwide movement. Cities across the country held rallies demanding accountability and transparency in law enforcement. Community leaders like Marcus Dixon and Evelyn Carter traveled tirelessly, speaking at events and organizing marches. Their message was clear. This wasn't just about Benjamin Hayes. It was about dismantling a system built on inequality. Journalist Daniel Foster played a crucial role in keeping the momentum alive. His expose on Ryan Cole's history went viral, revealing a pattern of misconduct that shocked even seasoned critics of the police force. Officers accused of similar behavior suddenly found themselves under scrutiny, leading to investigations and resignations. Public trust in law enforcement plummeted, forcing departments to implement reforms or risk losing funding entirely. In response, Commissioner Gregory Wells announced sweeping changes within the precinct. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, and independent oversight committees were established to review complaints of misconduct. Training programs focused on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity replaced outdated protocols. While some praised these efforts, others argued they didn't go far enough. Reforms are meaningless without enforcement, Laura often said during interviews. We need consequences, not promises. For Ryan Cole and Megan Doyle, there were no second chances. Both were formally charged with planting evidence and falsifying reports. Their trial attracted widespread attention, with protesters gathering outside the courthouse daily. Megan, visibly shaken, cooperated with investigators in exchange for leniency. She admitted to knowing about Ryan's actions but failing to report them, citing fear of retaliation. Her testimony painted a damning picture of a culture that rewarded cruelty and silenced dissent. Ryan, however, remained defiant. During court proceedings, he sneered at witnesses and rolled his eyes at the judge. When asked to explain his behavior, he doubled down on his claims of innocence, blaming political correctness for his downfall. His arrogance alienated even those who might have sympathized with him, and by the time the verdict was delivered, public opinion had turned decisively against him. The jury found Ryan guilty on multiple counts, including tampering with evidence and violating civil rights. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, a punishment many felt was too lenient given the harm caused. Megan received probation and community service, though she resigned from the force shortly afterward. Neither expressed remorse publicly, but privately Megan sought counseling, grappling with the guilt of her complicity. As the dust settled, Benjamin made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He submitted his resignation as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The announcement came during a press conference where he addressed reporters with calm resolve. "I've spent my career fighting for fairness and integrity," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "But I've come to realize that the system I served is deeply flawed. It protects the powerful and punishes the vulnerable. I can no longer participate in something I don't believe in." The room fell silent as his statement sank in. Some journalists scribbled furiously while others simply stared, stunned. Benjamin continued, "Resigning isn't an act of defeat. It's an act of hope. I want to dedicate my time to advocating for real change, working alongside communities to build a justice system that truly serves everyone." Clara stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. Though she understood his reasons, she worried about the toll it would take on him. But she also knew better than anyone how determined he was. If Benjamin set his mind to something, nothing could stop him. Laura Bennett supported his decision wholeheartedly. "You'll do more good outside the courtroom than inside it," she told him later. "Sometimes breaking away is the bravest thing you can do." With his resignation accepted, Benjamin threw himself into activism. He partnered with organizations fighting for criminal justice reform, traveling the country to speak at conferences and rallies. He worked closely with Marcus and Evelyn, learning from their experiences and amplifying their voices. Together, they drafted proposals for legislative changes, pushing lawmakers to address systemic inequities. Not everyone agreed with his approach. Critics accused him of abandoning his responsibilities, claiming he should have stayed in his position to effect change from within. Others dismissed him as naive, arguing that dismantling centuries-old systems was impossible. But Benjamin refused to listen. He believed in the power of collective action, in the idea that ordinary people could create extraordinary change. Months passed, and progress, slow and uneven, began to take shape. Lawmakers introduced bills aimed at increasing police accountability. Schools implemented programs teaching students about racial bias and privilege. Conversations once considered taboo became part of everyday discourse. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. One evening, Benjamin sat on the porch of his home, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Clara joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. "Tired," he admitted, taking a sip. "But hopeful. Change takes time, doesn't it?" She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "It does, and you're helping make it happen." They sat in silence for a while, enjoying the quiet. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Benjamin knew he wasn't alone. Across the nation, people inspired by his courage were standing up, speaking out and demanding better. They carried the torch he had lit, determined to keep it burning. And though the scars of his ordeal would always remain, Benjamin found peace in knowing he had used his pain to fuel purpose. Justice, he realized, wasn't a destination. It was a journey, and every step forward mattered.